Hello, this is Utsab. In this video, I'm going to be going over hashes. So, what is a hash? A hash is basically a collection of key value pairs. Let's take a look at an example here. So I'm going to open up IRB. Let's quit out of this. Alright, and we can declare a hash just by specifying a bunch of key value pairs. So we can say, let's say I'm going to represent myself. Utsab equals, I don't know, phone number. Maybe my phone number is 510-123-4567. Utsab can also have an address of some sort. And this could be 123 Fig Street, and so on. So, in this example, phone number and address are our keys, and these strings here are our values. In that example, we only use strings, but in reality, any Ruby object can be used as a key, and any Ruby object can be used as a value. To create a new hash where we are storing, we're mapping integers to certain things, like, oh, that's my, lucky number is 2. So here we map 2 to something. We can also map an array to anything we want. So we can say if our array is 2, 5, and 2, 4, and 6, and we can say these are all of my lucky numbers. So now if I pass in an array and access it this way, 2, 4, 6, prints out the value for that key. All right. Ruby hashes are, you may also know them as dictionaries or associative arrays in other languages. So this is what a hash is. Why do we use a hash? As we just saw, we can use a variety of objects as keys and values, and we didn't look at this yet, but you could have a hash within a hash. You can have a key mapping to another hash. So what this gives us is this surprising flexibility, and it's very useful to store all sorts of data structures. The other advantage is speed. So hashes provide us with the ability to do very, very quick lookups in near constant time. Let's see what that means. Let me open up a whiteboard here. Let's imagine what would happen if we didn't have a hash. Let's say we only had arrays. So let's say we have an array of all of our names. Let's say all of our contacts. So we've got Utsab, we've got Ray, we've got Lee, we've got Chris, we've got Angie, and so on. Well, let's imagine we had, 1 million people in our array. If we wanted to find, like Angie in this list, we'd have to iterate through all of these entries. We'd have to look at item 0, item 1, item 2, item 3, item 4, and just keep looking until we found Angie. With a hash, on the other hand, imagine all of your keys are these names, and they, maybe they map to something, and so on. And we get down to Angie, We could just look this up instantly with h of Angie. So this lookup is constant time, whereas this lookup is linear time. Okay. So this is some of the philosophy of hashes. Let's talk about how do we actually use a hash. So declaring a hash. One way, the most common way of declaring a hash is using literal notation. And that's what we've been doing so far. Now with literal notation, we're just writing out all the key value pairs in one go. So like we've been doing so far. Another way, which is less common, but it's done, you can use hash.new. So we can say my hash equals hash.new. Now what this will do is it will create an empty hash. One advantage of doing it this way is you can pass in a default value, which will be returned if you try to access a key that doesn't exist. So if we pass in, unknown as our default value, then now if we try to access anything in this hash that doesn't exist, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it will return unknown. Whereas up here with our literal array, if I tried to do something like that, h1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it'll return nil. Sometimes you want it to return a specific default value instead of nil, and in that case you might want to use hash.new. A couple other ways of declaring hashes. These are these are much less common, but it's good to know that they exist. You can use the hash.brackets class method, and the way this works is you kind of call this as a method. So inside the parentheses, you can pass in a list of key value pairs, like utsab, 510. Or let's do it like this. Phone number 510-123-456. Oh, sorry, I'm doing this wrong. You pass it in as a comma-separated list. And Ruby is going to be smart enough it assumes that each item in the list is alternating between keys and values. So then you might do address, and then 123 Fake Street, so on. And then finish that. Okay, that should work. And it creates this hash for you. And it expects an even number of arguments here. If you give it an odd number, it'll throw an error. And then finally, there's the hash method. And hash will take some kind of object. I wonder if this will work. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Can't convert array to hash. Okay, well, what it tries to do is whatever object you give it, like here we passed in this object 1, 2, 3, 4. It will try to call the toHash method of that object. So if that object doesn't have a toHash method, it will throw an error, like so. This is very rare, but you probably won't see this very often, but it's good to know that that exists. So that's how you declare a hash. Let's talk about how we add to a hash. So you can use a bracket notation to add elements to a hash. So if this is our hash currently, we can add a new element to it just by doing this equals bar. So here foo is the new key we're trying to add, and bar is the value we want to give to that key. So now if we print out the hash, it has our new key value pair in it. Okay, how do we access values in a hash? So one way that you've been seeing so far is we just use a bracket notation again, and it will print out the value. If that value does not exist, it will print null, nil, or some other thing. If we declared it with hash.new, it might print out that default value. But sometimes we want a custom behavior to handle that case when we're doing the lookup. If the lookup doesn't exist, or for whatever reason we want to maybe massage that value somehow before we print it out. So for that we can use h.fetch, the fetch method. And this will take the key as the first argument and then some default as the second argument. Well, there's many different ways you can call fetch. You can call it without this. You can call it just with the key, and it will throw an error if the key doesn't exist. So here I can fetch foo, and it'll give me the value. Sometimes it's nice if you want your program to throw an error if you try to access a hash in an invalid way. So in that case, you might want to use fetch. You can also use fetch to pass in a default value here, and the default value will only get returned if the key doesn't exist. So here I could pass in some invalid key and we'll get that default value. There's also ways to execute some block of code on the key value before you return it. And we're not going to get into that here, but just be aware that you can do that. Okay, hash querying. One thing I would recommend that you do is to look at the Ruby docs for hash. So you can see here, hash includes the enumerable module. Remember that arrays also included the enumerable module. And remember, there are lots of convenient methods in the enumerable module, like each and min, max, stuff like that. So those are also available to you in hash. There are also lots of hash-specific methods, like each key, each pair, each value. When I scan these, and just from looking at this, I could tell, okay, these will be useful maybe if I want to iterate over a hash at some point. We're going to go over a couple of these because you'll probably need to use these as common operations. So has key will return true or false if the hash has a key, the key that you're looking for. Has value returns same thing, true or false, if it has the value that you're looking for. Let's try that once. So if we have h, let's say h.has value, and let's give it something that's not in the lists like that. No method has value. Why did that happen? As underscore value. Oh, right. It's not camel case, it's underscore. As value, and that gives false. If we pass in a value that we know is in the list, like it has bar, we can pass in bar and that returns true. Okay, empty returns true or false if the hash is empty, and size will return the number of key value pairs in the hash. Okay, iterating over a hash. This is less common, simply because if you remember, the original reason why we use hashes is because we can look things up in constant time. If we're ever going to iterate over a hash, that's a linear time operation to iterate over all the key value pairs in your hash. So, it's not really the most efficient use of a hash. But nevertheless, sometimes you will need to iterate over a hash, so it's good to know how you might do that. So I'll show you one example here. So the first step is I would look at the Ruby docs. So I look at it, scan over, see if there's anything that seems relevant. And here we have each key, right? So let's try that one first. So this will, I assume, iterate over all the keys in the hash. So we've got h. Let's go with our original one, utsab. So let's iterate over all the keys in our utsab hash. So we can do utsab. Well, let's look at the syntax first. So each key. So it's going to, use a bracket notations. This is a block, right? And this is the variable of that block. So the way it works is the block will use this variable, and it can do whatever it wants with that variable. So let's try it out. We can do each key and pass in key, and then our block. Let's say we want to just return key and key. Just to make it more clear, we can do whatever we want. The key is that. And I'm not sure if we covered this yet, but if you ever want to print out the value of a variable inside of another string, you can use this hash bracket notation, like so. So let's see what happens here. Nothing happens. Oh, because we didn't puts it out. We have to do something with it. So we'll use puts to print it out. Now we have our output. The key is phone number, the key is address. One thing I'll clarify is the variable of key, it can be anything. We could call it K, we could call it X, and we just have to make sure that we're using the appropriate variable name in our block, and it'll still work. Okay. That is our introduction to hashes. Thank you.